Right, hello. In this video, I'd like to create a patch to replicate the polyrhythm section of Moog Subharmonicon synthesizer. So let me open the manual to take a quick look at what the synthesizer looks like, and specifically the section that I want to focus on. So this is the layout of the synthesizer. The middle section is the oscillator, which I'm not going to get into. But the section on the left is the sequencer and the polyrhythm section. Let me zoom in on this section. So here you can see that we have this tempo knob. Tempo knob sets the, the tempo for the machine, and these four knobs above, they dictate the rate of change, or the rate of the progression of the step sequencers that we see here on the top. So we have two sequencers here. They are 4 steps long. It may be relatively short, but the cool thing about polyrhythms is that when these 4 rhythm knobs combine, they can build interesting polyrhythms that sound very interesting. So let's get back to the patching window, and let's start with 2 very basic audio sources that allow us to differentiate between sequence 1 and sequence 2. I'm gonna pick 2 audio files. 1 second. So let's pick this one and this one. I will connect these 2 to the output. Let's see how they sound like. Okay, this is like a rim shot. They're both like rim shots. So let's try to differentiate them. How about this one? Okay. Yeah, it's all right. So we have 2 different audio sources, and let's pretend that the first one will be triggered by the sequence 1, and the second one will be triggered by the sequence 2. I think we need to send 1 to trigger the to these audio files. I think these refer to the index number of the file inside this object. This is a playlist object, so you can have multiple files in there. If I'm not mistaken, the 1 here refers to the first one, the first audio file in the list. So that's why we're sending 1. And to keep things a little bit tidy, I'm gonna create these send and receive object pairs. So receive sequence 1 and sequence 2. So then here I can have just bang objects and send sequence 1. So each of these bang objects can represent this step in the sequence. And then these sequences can each bang can be triggered through a counter object. So we can have 4 counters, and with each bang that we send to a counter, we should have a number from 1 to 4, and each of these numbers should trigger one of these bangs. And one way we can do that would be to use a gate object, gate with 4 outlets, and each outlet of this gate triggers another bang object. And then we can use a trigger with a bang and integer, in this order, so that when an integer is received, we first open the gate for that, let's say gate, for that number, and then trigger a bang object. So here we can see that counter is triggering and the subsequent bang object. All right. So now let's see. Oh yeah, we can have the same thing. I can just duplicate this for, oops, this is too much. I can duplicate this for sequence 2. Yeah. All right. So we have 2 sequences. Now what we need to do is to use a metronome to periodically, go through these numbers. So before we get to the metro object, I'd like to create a transport object. So this transport object is going to be the specific a clock that I'd like these metro objects to refer to. So you can have a transport object with the name Subharmonicon, sub h. And if I have a metro object and say that and add that this transport attribute, then this means that this metro will listen to the clock of this transport with that name. So here, as for like a quick demonstration, I can have an interval. The rate of metro is, let's say, 4n. Oops, yeah, 4n. Let's see. Another attribute that we can give here is active 1, which it looks like transport is not a proper name. Yeah, it's transport Subharmonicon. Okay, this should work now. So active 1 means that whenever this metro will only work when, or it will automatically start working when the transport is activated. To see that, I can create I can create a toggle object and toggle the transport on and off. And when the transport is on, metro starts working, and metro stops working when I turn it off. Another useful attribute for the transport would be the tempo. For now I don't need to change it, but because we are providing tempo relative interval here, the metro should respect the tempo changes. So if I make it smaller, metro rate goes way down. So I'm just gonna set this to 135. So it's a decent rate, I will say. Alright, so the time signature of this transport by default is 4/4. So each bar is 4 quarter notes, and I can monitor the progression of the transport with by sending the transport a bang, and the first 2 outlets of the transport object should tell me the current bar and the current beat. So here I can see that every 4 beats the bar count increases, and that makes sense. All right. So getting back to Subharmonicon, we know that the rhythm knobs emit or spit out a value from 1 to 16. So 1 here means that the sequencer is is triggered. The sequencer progresses to the next step with every beat, and then if the value is 2, that means the sequencer progresses with every 2 beats. So it's like whatever the value of the rhythm knob is, you are multiplying you're multiplying the rate of change. In other words, it is like we know that, for example, 480 ticks is the amount of ticks that is needed for the for a beat. So a beat is represented with 480 ticks. So if we take a dial that gives us values from 1 to 16, we can multiply that with the base tick number, and that would give us the interval that is needed to advance the sequencer one step. So I'm gonna change the attributes of this dial from 1 to 16. So I can quickly take a look at the values spit out from this dial. It's from 1 to 16. And then here I can multiply this by 480, and because we are sending ticks, I need to specify in the message that these are ticks. So I'm gonna append ticks to this value, and then pass it in the second inlet of this metronome. All right. So then if I pass this the outcome of this metro into this counter, I should see the each of these steps to be highlighted one at a time. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And in this case, this should be happening with every beat. 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. And then moving this to 2, 4. I can see that the beat count for the transport is increasing by 2. It is consistent with the value of the metro. Okay. So the next thing that we can tackle here would be to decide which sequencer we want this metro to route to. For this, we can have two toggles. One would enable the toggle. One would enable the sequence 1, and the other one enable the sequence 2. And using a gate object, we can route the. We can send the bangs to the corresponding sequences. Let's take this one and put it over here. And I'm gonna take this, copy gate, and then the metro. Let's double the bangs from the metro with this trigger. Let's organize this a little bit. Okay, so if I start to the transport and enable the first metronome for the first sequencer. I see that first sequencer is triggered, and the second is triggered. Okay. So far this looks good. So now what we need to do is we need to basically duplicate all of this to 4 different metro objects. Let's start with the second one. So I know that I can't just send all these into the second metro directly to the counter, because then when both metros are enabled, they will be triggering the counter twice. So what we need to do is to combine these bangs from these different metros and make sure that these different bangs are only accounted for once and not any more than that. One way we can do that is to use the threshold object. So threshold object, when it receives a message more than once within that threshold of time, it treats the it just drops the message afterward, message that came later. So I can have a pack object. This pack object can collect the bang messages from all these different gates, pass it to the threshold, and then this threshold would invoke the call the counter. Like this. So if I enable this one, and then I'll enable the second clock. Ooh, okay. So I can clearly hear that it is triggered. These two different metros trigger at different times. Ah, okay. Dot, 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 dot. So this is not usual, or yeah, this is not what I expected. What we need to do is to use this attribute called quantize, and quantize means that it's going to the metro object spits out a bang at the quantized at quantized intervals. So if I set this as like 0, 1, 0, that means it'll only it'll only send a bang at the beat. So I can copy this over to the other metro object. I wonder if I can just make this object smaller. Yeah, like this. Alright, so let's try this one more time. Turn on the tempo. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then let's play around with it. Ta, 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 two, 3, 4. 3, 4. Alright. To have a better understanding of like how we're doing in terms of the beats, I will be checking the value of the transport. So let's see if I have let's create another metro object. And let's have this taking every like 8 note. And let's reset the transport so that it's a little bit easier to follow. Oops. Oh, I didn't connect it. One, two. Okay, so it's 2. Makes sense. Set it to 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. And then let's reduce this to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and then let's send value 4 to the second sequencer. Two. Okay. And then let's enable this for the first gate, first sequence. Looks good. Let's stop this. And then let's add the remaining two sequences. this one. That's the first. Oh, I see that I forgot to add the threshold for the other object, other sequence. One, two, three, and then the final. All right, and setting these to 1. Let's see what it sound like. Nice. So just so that we see these a little bit better, let's move these to the presentation. And then finally these two. Okay, so if I turn on the presentation mode, let's see, what do we have? Let's take these. Move these two sequences. And then we have the first one. Controlled by this dial, this dial. Let's copy it, let's move it closer. This one, sound it closer. And then finally, the fourth one. Yeah. Let me also have the transport enable and tempo to the presentation. These are here. So I'm going to move these closer to the sequencers. Let's see. Oops. I'm gonna get rid of this object. Now only the second sequencer is running. Let's add the first one back. I can change the tempo. Alright. This all seems to be working. What I would do next is to change the presentation of this patch so that it looks a little bit tidier. But that's it. Alright. Thank you, everyone, if you watched it until this point, and see you next time.